Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K18's My League mode. My name is Pete and today we complete the race for a playoff spot in our NBA 2K18 My League expansion series. With only 9 games left to play in their third NBA season, the Louisville Legionnaires are still the third seed in the Eastern Conference. They haven't clinched a playoff spot yet, but that could change after the very next game. However, before we jump into that, I once again want to take the time and answer a few of your questions. And one question that gets asked on pretty much every episode lately: what is the draft class that I'm using that contains Andre Flanders, Mitch Dennis and company? Well, finding that draft class is actually very easy. All you have to do is search by user ID and enter the username YOMO, that is J-O-M-O. You will then very likely see 3 different draft classes, and the one that I'm using is the non-generic fictional draft class Year 1. And that is the class that contains all the players that were in the previous draft, including first overall pick Grant McLeod, as well as our very own Andre Flanders. Now, a quick disclaimer here: the creator of that draft class has made some changes to it since I downloaded it for this playthrough, and so some of the players might be rated or play a little bit differently. Also keep in mind that I had the storyline development turned on for this draft class, so throughout the year some of the prospects' ratings here changed as well, so just keep that in mind. Your results with this draft class will very likely not be the same as the ones that I had. For the upcoming draft, by the way, we're using the Year 2 version of that draft class, and I hope that one will be equally as good. Another question that was asked is whether I think the team's inexperience in the playoffs will hinder the team's success in the next few weeks. And yeah, that might very well be the case, although I think 2K doesn't really care about such a thing. Now, we do have a bit of playoff experience on the roster. Rajon Rondo, for example, is probably the most prominent example, but Josh Richardson actually made the playoffs in his rookie year. Courtney Lee is also a veteran who has made the playoffs several times. In this playthrough, Rodney Hood also went to the playoffs twice with the Utah Jazz. And last but not least, Boban Marjanovic also has some playoff experience. Now, you can also easily see that this list doesn't really include most of our core players, and so realistically one would have to assume that the overall inexperience will be a factor. However, once again, I don't think 2K takes this aspect into consideration, and so I think our playoff performance will be very similar to our regular season performance. That of course also depends largely on who our first round matchup will be. Have I thought about resting players once we have clinched a playoff spot? Yes, I have, but the point where we'll start resting players is not the point where we'll simply clinch a playoff spot, but rather the point where we have locked down a particular spot. Right now, making the playoffs is of course the #1 goal, but I don't want to start resting players too early. Even if we make the playoffs in the next game, we are still fighting for home court advantage in the first round, and so I also want to make sure that the Legionnaires stay in the 3rd or at worst the 4th seed. Once home court advantage is hopefully secured, we will then of course start resting players, and you can expect heavier minutes for some of the role players. Andre Flanders, by the way, will probably also be on the list of players who get some rest, simply because I think that he will also be a rather important factor in the playoffs. But enough talk about the playoffs, we haven't clinched them yet, so let's finally jump into the first game of the episode, a matchup with the Charlotte Hornets that could very well change that. Unfortunately though, the Legionnaires fall short despite the importance of the game. Charlotte was hitting 3 after 3 in the 4th quarter. Over the course of the game, they shot 54% from deep and made 14 triples. And in the end, in what was a close game, they managed to come out on top. This now also keeps the Hornets' playoff hopes alive. Before the game, they were in the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference, and with the win here, they move up to number 8. A quick look at a few of the key performances here. Andre Flanders led the way in scoring with 18 points, followed by Rodney Hood with 17. Mitch Dennis once again very efficient in only 18 minutes of action. He finished the game with 14 points, 1 more than Bryce Johnson. Josh Richardson unfortunately fouled out near the end. Definitely not the best game for him tonight, as he finished the game with 9 points, 3 rebounds and 6 fouls. However, the worst news of this game are still to come, because after about 20 minutes of action, Mo Bamba once again went down, suffering a sprained right toe in the process. Now, luckily the injury isn't too severe here, with a recovery time of 1 to 2 weeks. Still, he will miss a few games and that could hurt us. Luckily though, we have a bit of an easy opponent coming up next. The Los Angeles Lakers, currently one of the worst teams in the Western Conference, and they are also still missing their star point guard Lonzo Ball. So even though we lost in the previous game, a win here might seal the deal, depending of course on various tiebreakers, but looking at our record, I'm pretty sure we would win most of those. Now, I apologize, I accidentally simulated the entire game, so we sadly have no video footage for this one. Still, after a dominant 37-point 4th quarter, the Legionnaires take the victory. And Andre Flanders once again finds himself at the top of the scoring list, this time with 23 points, while both Tyler Ulis and Deontay Davis rack up double-doubles. And as expected, this game actually does the trick, as with the victory here against the Lakers, the Louisville Legionnaires clinched their very first playoff appearance. Being only in their third season with a very young roster, this is an incredible achievement, one that definitely points towards a bright future in Louisville. Speaking of bright futures, for the past month of March, Andre Fernandez also won Rookie of the Month, now the only Eastern Conference rookie to have done so twice. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Legionnaires are not in the clear yet. Despite clinching a playoff spot, everything from 3rd to 8th seed is still possible, and so a few more wins would definitely help the team out. And our next matchup could be a difficult one, as without Mo Bamba, we go up against the New York Knicks. The Knicks currently occupy the 6th seed and still have a chance to move up a few spots, so a victory here could be very valuable for them. And surprise, surprise, that is also exactly what they get. A big victory at home for the Knicks behind 33 points from Kristaps Porzingis, as the Louisville Legionnaires go down 97-105. For Louisville, Skal Labissière leads the way with a 16-point, 11-rebound double-double, followed by Bryce Johnson, who put up 13 and 7. Tyler Ulis also with a second double-double in a row with 10 points and 11 assists, while Rodney Hood, Andre Flanders and Boban Marjanovic all scored 10 points each. Now only 6 games are left in the regular season, and the first and the last one of those will be against the Orlando Magic, who are luckily already out of the playoff race. And that also showed in tonight's game. The Legionnaires absolutely dominated from start to finish. The outcome of this game was never really in question. The end result, a dominant 27-point victory for Louisville. The Legionnaires' best scorer tonight, Rodney Hood, with 28 points, bouncing back from a few rather mediocre games. Skal Labissière also once again strong with 23 points and 6 rebounds, while Andre Flanders barely misses the 20-point mark and finishes with 19. Richardson in a bit of a scoring slump these past few games. This game the first time he finished in double digits since the start of the episode, and his 13 points here are still not overwhelming. Much better than the performance of Tyler Ulis, who once again flirted with a double-double and finished the game with 12 points and 8 assists. The victory here is then followed up by more positive news, as Mo Bamba returns to the lineup after missing just 3 games. And he will also not get any additional rest whatsoever because the next matchup is once again important. We are playing the Indiana Pacers next, and you can see them there barely at the bottom of the screen, with 38 wins still clinging onto that last bit of hope for a playoff spot. And speaking of playoff spots, we have a bit of movement in the Western Conference, where 3 more teams have now clinched their road to round 1. And among those teams, a big surprise, currently in the 2nd seed, the Sacramento Kings. Their roster at the moment really not all that great. The team is led by point guard George Hill, and the 2 former Legionnaires Kyle Kuzma and Cheick Diallo are both starting. Apparently though, that has been enough to push them up to 50-win territory, so it definitely remains very interesting to see what the Kings will be able to do in the playoffs. The 2 other teams then no surprises really. Both the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Golden State Warriors clinch a spot, while the former 1st seed, the Phoenix Suns, have dropped off significantly, currently holding on to the 8th seed and struggling to even make the playoffs. That struggle is probably also something that the Indiana Pacers can talk a lot about. However, their desperation showed in tonight's game. They went all out and secured themselves a double-digit lead over the Legionnaires after just 2 minutes of action, and they held on to that up until the very end. With a 5-point victory here, the Pacers' playoff hopes stay alive, while the Legionnaires still remain unmoved in the 3rd seed. And after struggling for the past few games, Josh Richardson was back in this one. His shooting numbers not overly impressive, but still good enough to be the Legionnaires' top scorer with 21. Not quite the 40 points that Kevin Durant dropped for the Pacers, but still a reassuring life sign. Tyler Ulis also manages to continue his impressive performance from the last few games. Once again, he comes up just shy of a double-double with 14 points and 9 assists. Mitch Dennis then finishes with 13, Rodney Hood with 12, and Mo Bamba in his first game back immediately puts up a double-double with 11 points and 11 rebounds. So with that, we're now down to 4 games left, with our next matchup coming up against the Brooklyn Nets. And the Nets are actually among 2 teams to have clinched a playoff spot after the last game. Both Chicago and Brooklyn are safely in the first round. However, I imagine Brooklyn is still fighting for home court advantage. At the same time, this means a win here against Brooklyn would definitely lock down home court advantage for us, either as the 3rd or as the 4th seed. And visiting the Legionnaires in Louisville, the Nets really didn't look all that great. They shot a poor percentage from the field, they had bad rim protection, and they sent the Legionnaires to the free throw line 33 times, so the end result here was no surprise. The Legionnaires take the game by 15, 106-91. Our player of the game, despite his 6 turnovers, Josh Richardson, he finished with a game-high 31 points and also added 6 rebounds, all the while remaining perfect from the free throw line on 10 attempts. Andre Flanders also once again among our top scorers with 15 tonight, and Mo Bamba puts up another big double-double with 13 points, 11 rebounds and 5 blocks. And so after the win here, home court advantage for the Legionnaires is secured. With only 3 games left, the Nets have no chance of reaching 47 wins, and that means the Legionnaires will definitely play 4 games at home in the first round. Whether as the 3rd or as the 4th seed, that remains to be seen. It also depends on Chicago's performance in the next few games, because the Bulls actually own the tiebreaker against us after winning 3 of the 4 matchups we had this season. Dropping down to the 4th seed is something that I'd really like to avoid if possible, because should we win our first round series, then we would very likely face the Cavaliers in the next round. And that is something I think no Eastern Conference team is looking forward to, so if possible I would like to hold on to that 3rd seed. A quick look at the Western Conference, where 2 more teams have now also clinched a playoff seat. After getting to 45 wins, the Utah Jazz are in, as are last year's champions, the Oklahoma City Thunder. All in all, the Western Conference teams are all pretty close together, so unlike in the East where the Cavaliers really dominate at the moment, I don't really see a clear favorite to take it all in the West. So 3 games now remain, and despite having clinched a playoff spot already, it would be a good idea to win 1 or 2 of those, otherwise we are running the risk of dropping down to the 4th seed. Nonetheless, for those 3 remaining games we are going to switch it up a bit. I will not tell you just yet what we're going to do, and of course winning and securing the 3rd seed remains the priority, but I have taken some inspiration from the real-life NBA, and I can say this much: our roster will change ever so slightly in the next episode. For today, let's make the cut here. I know we didn't entirely complete the race to the playoffs, but the next episode will not only include a few moves but also the end of the season awards, and that always stretches things out a bit. So for today, the Legionnaires have clinched not only a playoff spot but also home court advantage in the first round. We are still battling to stay in the 3rd seed, however, so the next episode should still have 1 or 2 important games. Now of course, if you liked the episode, then please leave a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel and haven't subscribed already, then go ahead and feel free to do so. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!